Hi guys, it's Rob from Royal Balls. Today let's take a look at the next steps. As you start to breed, your collection starts to grow, you inevitably start to add snakes. So let's take a look at some of the snakes that I picked up following my first forays into ball python breeding. Remember, I bought these as hatchlings, so they were bought at least 2 years ago, some of them more than that. So they've now grown up, they've become adult and they're ready for breeding. Did I make the right decisions 2 or 3 years ago when I bought these snakes and added them to my collection? Are they still valuable in my collection 2 or 3 years later? Obviously, in the interim period, I've bought more snakes, my collection has grown even more, and as your collection grows and evolves, some of your ideas change, some of your interests change. But were the original snakes that I purchased 2 or 3 years ago as my collection was growing still valuable in my collection today? Okay guys, so after the initial pairings, that's when I started doing a little research and discovered that the place to go for ball pythons in Malaysia was ARP constrictors. And so I went down there and took a look at some of the snakes, and I ended up purchasing 2 additional snakes. I purchased this guy, who of course is in shed. This is a Scorch male. He is a super pastel, he's leopard, and he's Mojave. So again, a bunch of codominant genes in there. I knew enough about genetics at this stage to realise that I wanted animals that I could breed and get first generation results from. This was the male. And I purchased this female, and you can see she is already quite large. She's held her colour really well. But this is a pastel Mojave vanilla, or Pastave vanilla. This snake was bought on the basis of I wanted a good looking snake, and this snake was really bright as a hatchling, so I bought this snake. I was working on a budget, but I did buy as many genes as possible, and I added genes that I didn't have in my collection. And vanilla was a gene that I wasn't familiar with, but I could see from the snakes themselves that vanilla made the snakes look really pretty, so add vanilla too. Again, I bought multi-gene animals. I bought snakes which were pretty that I wanted to work with, so I got a male and this female. I attempted to breed this female last year, and she did start all the classic signs. She got really fat, bowl hugging, lying on her side, and then she didn't go on to lay. So that was a failure. I had her for about 2 years, grew her up, and perhaps it was a little bit too soon to try to breed her. She will be bred again this year, not to the original male. My collection has grown since then, my ideas have changed since then, as they inevitably do. I have a different pairing for her for this year. But those are the 2 snakes that I purchased from ARP Constrictors, and I also purchased an additional female. Again, as my knowledge grew and expanded, I realised that I needed more females if I was going to breed. It's the females that lay the eggs. So I bought this girl. This is a spinner or pinstripe spider female. Here she's already eating like a dinosaur, and she has been paired to my Scorch male, the original male that I bought from ARP Constrictors. And he's being paired to this female now, and you can see she's already starting to get a little bit chunky. She's eating really well, so we're hopeful for this season. Those were 3 snakes that I purchased as my collection started to grow. So 2 females and 1 male. The females were genes that I didn't have that I wanted to work with, and the male was another 4 gene animal. Again, a pretty looking snake with genes that I didn't have in my collection, and all the genes were dominant or co-dominant, and therefore can give you instant results in the first generation when you breed them. So those were the snakes that I purchased. So at this stage of the game, I now owned 2 powerhouse males, both 4 gene animals, or 3 genes and a superform. I already had success with Tiger, my banana pastel Enchi warmer, and I purchased this guy as a hatchling, so this guy is much younger. He is also a 4 gene animal, super pastel, so 2 copies of the pastel gene, and leopard and Mojave. So I now had in my collection 2 powerhouse males to go with my 2 normal females, and the two females that I'd purchased, the spinner female and the Pastave vanilla female. So as I was growing these animals up, I was visiting reptile shops and looking at snakes, and of course this guy is in shed as well. So this guy was my next purchase. He is a pastel pied male. I realized at the time that this would be my first foray into recessive genetics, and I realized that to get visual recessives I needed to have a pair. Couldn't find one, could not find a female to match him to, at least not one that was anywhere near being mature. And I did actually set my heart on producing a killer pied, which is a super pastel pied, so I needed pastel in both of the parent animals in order to make the killer pied. Undaunted, I paired this male to my second normal female and produced a clutch of eggs. Bred to a normal, of course, no visuals. Because he's a visual pied, all of the offspring from that clutch were 100% het for pied, and some of them were pastels and female. So that was my first foray into breeding hets, and let me show you what I kept back from that clutch of his. Believe it or not, the second clutch of eggs I ever produced was a normal to a pied pairing, and all the babies were hets. So my second clutch, I produced my own hets, and this is a female pastel. This is his daughter. She is 100% het for pied, but I kept two of these girls back, and they're both pastel. I hadn't lost sight of my original objective to breed a killer pied or super pastel pied. So again, learning as I go along, I knew I needed pastel in both the parents, and I knew I needed at least one copy of the pied gene in each of the parents. So the pastel pied male is the perfect partner for this female. She is pastel as well. It will be a visual to a het pairing, so 50% of the offspring should be visual pieds and 50% will be 100% het for pied. Because both parents are carrying the pastel gene, I have a 1 in 4 chance of producing a super pastel. So when you work out those odds, and I have two females, I do actually stand a very good chance, if I pair the male back to both of his daughters in about a year's time, I do have a very good chance of producing the super pastel pied, which was my original goal. I of course have subsequently added a female pied to my collection, but as I mentioned in the first video, your powerhouse males can breed any number of females. So I've got now 3 females that guy can go to, 2 of which are het for pied, which I bred myself, and 1 of which is a visual pied female, which I picked up along the way. And I now have 2 rapidly reaching maturity het for pied females, both of which are pastel, in my collection to breed back and produce the original goal, which was the killer pied or super pastel pied. Don't give up just because you go a little bit wrong. I couldn't get hold of a visual pied female, but I solved that issue by creating my own hets. A very enjoyable experience learning about the genetics and the anticipation of actually breeding back ball pythons that you've bred yourself to get the ultimate goal. So 2 of these girls bred back to the father should give me a really good shot at getting what was my original goal of a killer pied. This is another female that I kept back from my original banana clutch. This is one of the non-bananas. You remember the male was the banana pastel enchi warmer, and one of the females was this pastel enchi, which unbelievably is also in shed. Seems like all my snakes are in shed at the moment, but I kept this girl back too. This girl is very rapidly getting up to size, but again, in keeping with the philosophy of needing more females than males, and enchi being a tremendous gene that enhances most of the genetic combinations that you put it into. This was a valuable female to keep back in my collection, so you can see how quickly over just a couple of years and from that first breeding that by keeping back the right snakes for your own collection and your own plans, you very quickly establish a base of females which are going to be valuable in your collection for years to come. So this is a pastel Enchi female, codominant genes, so they will be expressed in the first generation of offspring. So another valuable addition to my collection that I bred myself, which makes it even more satisfying. Okay guys, I hope you enjoyed looking at those additional snakes that I bought very early in my ball python breeding career. I think you can see that I did make some very good choices. The females are still extremely valuable in my collection, and the males, by buying powerhouse males that are multi-gene, they're also still a valuable part of my breeding team, even though I have now progressed into recessive genes and have several recessive projects. In particular, clown and lavender albino have been added to my collection over the intervening years. But particularly exciting for me are the prospects of now breeding back snakes that I bred myself, that were produced here at Royal Balls, that I held back, being able to breed those back to some of my males and produce offspring from snakes that were born here. It's tremendously exciting and very, very satisfying. So I hope that gives you some motivation, a little bit of the history of how my collection grew and did I make the right choices. Some of the pairings that I made, undaunted by not being able to get some of the recessive genes that I needed. I produced my own hets, and that was 2 years ago, and that's now paying off in that the hets that I produced are now rapidly getting up to breeding size, and within the next year or so we'll be able to breed those. So very exciting times. But remember also that the snakes you buy today are not going to be of breeding age until 2 or 3 years from now. And are they still going to be valuable in your collection in 3 years' time? The choices you make today in terms of your breeding and your snake purchases are what you are going to need, or what you will have in your collection to work with in 3 years from now. So you really do need to think ahead. So hope you enjoyed the snakes. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.